Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome you all to the post-lunch session of this virtual conference organized by Telangana Ophthalmological Society. We are live from Dr. G.N. Rao Hall and welcome you to the session 4 of day 2, that is National Symposium 6. And to chair this session, we have Dr. Sri Ganesh, along with the co-chairperson, Dr. Satyajit Sinha, and the session will be moderated by Dr. Manoj C. Mathur. May I now request Dr. Manoj C. Mathur, sir, to take over the session. Over to you, Manoj, sir.
Thank you, Sneha. It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce the chairperson, Dr. Sri Ganesh. He is the chairman and managing director at Mitradhama Super Speciality Hospital, Bengaluru. The co-chair for this session is Dr. Satyajit Sinha. He is a well-known surgeon from Bihar, ABI Institute, Patna. I am the moderator. I shall be introducing the speakers, and then I request Dr. Sri Ganesh and Dr. Satyajit to call upon the speakers alternately. The first speaker of the day is Dr. Satanshu Mathur, High-Tech Eye Institute Laser Center, Kashipur, Uttarakhand. He shall be speaking on branding in practice, when and how. The second speaker will be Dr. Sri Ganesh himself. He shall be speaking about entrepreneurship in ophthalmology. The next speaker will be Dr. Virendra Agarwal from Virendra Laser Phacosurgery Center, and he shall be speaking to us about pros and cons of present health schemes. Next will be Dr. Sonu Goel. He is the director at Anand Eye Hospital and Postgraduate Institute, Jaipur. He will be smiling a while, probably. Smile a while is his topic. Dr. Harvansh Lal, he is the director of Delhi Eye Center and co-chairman Department of Ophthalmology, Sri Gangaram Hospital, and he is currently the vice president of AIOS. He shall be speaking to us about toric IOL, get it right, if not, set it right. Then Dr. Satyajit Sinha himself, he will be speaking about endothelial protection in phacoemulsification of patients with uncontrolled diabetes. And then Dr. Samar Basak, he shall be speaking to us about increasing donor cornea utilization during the acute shortage. He is director at Disha Eye Hospitals, Kolkata. And last but not the least, we have Dr. Vanati M., Professor Rajendra Prasad Center for Ophthalmic Sciences, AIIMS, New Delhi. She will be addressing about current perspectives in fungal keratitis. Over to Dr. Sri Ganesh to call upon the first speaker to start the proceedings.
Good afternoon, everybody. And now I would like to invite Dr. Satanshu Mathur to give his talk on branding in practice, when and how.
Thanks, Shri Ganesh. Thanks, Telangana Ophthalmological Society, Santosh, Dr. Manoj, and all the chairpersons. Can you hear me, Shri Ganesh?
Yes, yes, yes.
So, important. My topic is branding and marketing. Why and how? We always say, we are doctors, we should not go for the branding and marketing. But what we are going to discuss, this is ethical branding and marketing, which is must in this time. As you see, I have written Jim Corbett National Park along with my name. Why? Because this is going to promote the medical tourism. So this is a type of marketing that is ethical, and that is where we are and where we want to go. This depends upon you. If you want to reach the last step, you have to do branding and marketing. If you want to stay at the place where you are standing now, you do not need to do anything. So if you want to achieve something, this branding and marketing is very important nowadays. Strategies for the practice. What business we are in? We are in the business of marketing ourselves. What is a brand? Start by dispelling some myths about the branding. First, a brand is not a logo alone. Lot of people think that brand is logo. We make good logo. We waste a lot of time making a logo. Just like we have Polo logo or Rota logo, that will suffice. No, only logo will not do anything. Brand is not an identity that you have put something outside your clinic as your identity. No, this is not the branding. So, a brand is not a product. Just like this product sold by a contact lens person by name of Renu. This is a product. This is not a brand. So what is a brand? A brand is a person gut feeling about a product, a service. When a patient comes to you, enter inside the premises, from the parking, from the reception area, from the treatment by doctor, and when he going to the optical shop or pharmacy and they have the feeling of satisfaction, that is known as the service, that is known as the branding. Why a hospital should brand? The steps in establishing a new brand and how to grow your brand. First important is why establish a brand. You see, there are so many same faces. Can you distinguish any face? No. So if you want to distinguish from the common persons, you want to distinguish yourself as a different identity, you need a brand. Otherwise, you will mess up with along with this all crowd. Patient today have many choices. Gone are the days when patient used to be loyal to one family doctor, but the patient today has more choices. When somebody wants to have LASIK treatment done in Delhi, he goes to the internet, type LASIK center in Delhi, he gets 5 to 10 answers. So there he want to know the feedback. So branding our center is very important in attracting the patient to your center. You see, if we go to a mall shop, we want to purchase some soap. There are 1300 soap brands available in the market today. How do you decide you have to buy which one? So naturally, you go, you have the mindset up, you have to take Nirma, you go for Nirma, you have mindset of Surf, you will say Surf. So brand is very important when you have to select among a crowd. Now the treatment shift towards commoditization. Gone are the days when patient used to be loyal to one family doctor, but patient today now have their choices. So what we have to do? This red ball differentiates you from other white balls. So to differentiate your hospital from other similar hospitals in neighbor, you have to set up your own brand. A brand reduces the need to compete on price alone. Normally what happens? Our neighbor is charging this much amount, we have to charge the same amount. But if you have a brand, you are out of the competition on this price. Now the centers offering LASIK for 9,919. They are having different, we are having one cataract free surgery, we are LASIK free evolution. But once we have a strong brand, we need not to compete on price alone. We can set up our own terms and conditions. Importantly, a strong brand gives your employee also a focus, a sense of purpose, and sense of security. Why we are here. Today we have centers offering. So if you have center have brand, your employee will be more satisfied and chances of leaving the setup by the employees are less. So how you can establish brand of a hospital? The power of brand is inversely proportional to its scope. Example, if you want to build a powerful brand in the mind of the consumer, you will have to concentrate on your brand and not expand it. What does it mean by expanding it? It is not a good idea to have an eye hospital name attached to a gynae or dental clinic, like Nirmal Dental and Eye Clinic, Ganga Dental and Eye Clinic. You should have an identity of an eye clinic separately if you want to make it a brand. The three most important words in differentiating your brand: focus, focus, and focus. A brand becomes stronger when you narrow the focus. Example, every small town had coffee shops. So what can you find to eat in this coffee shop? Bread, cake, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and of course, coffee. So many things. It is not focus. However, in an incredible burst of business activity, narrowed the focus and started Starbucks, which sold only coffee. And now they have 70,000 outlets all over India, and they are the brand now. They are selling only the coffee, not the cake, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Similarly, Subway decided to sell only the submarine, and they are the top nowadays. They have so many outlets nowadays. So you have to focus on, you are not to go beyond your focus. Positioning your brand. Dig deep for position within an existing category or create a new category. This is known as blue ocean and red ocean. What happens in Red Ocean? We go and sit in the practice, competing with our neighborhood. We fight tooth and nail with them. We have to compromise on our quality. We have to compromise on the prices. And that is known as Red Ocean, where the blood comes out of us, red blood. That is known Red Ocean. This is not a good strategy. We should follow the Blue Ocean strategy. We should create uncontested market space and make the competition irrelevant. We should start the things which have not been done by our neighbors in our city. We should be first, and this is known as Blue Ocean strategy. Arvind Eye Hospital example, they take the blue ocean of bottom of private patients who could never afford treatment at private hospital. Now you see, they are treating the poor and they are treating patients who rich also. So they have set an example of blue ocean. They have touched the field which are not touched by others. Himalaya drugs, they created a new market of consumer who prefer herbal medicines. And you see, Himalaya drugs are now on top of the Ayurvedic medicines. The birth of brand is associated, achieved with publicity, not advertising. Once you establish a brand, then advertising can help you to stay healthy. Like what Arvind Hospital did. They were the first hospital to start free patient. Now, mouth to mouth, they are getting publicity. So this is the publicity, not the advertisement, what you get by mouth to mouth from the patients. Invest in your people. People working for you, and your patients are your brand ambassadors. Your staff, persons related with your profession, optical shop, chemists, referral doctors, they are your brand. You should invest in them. You should give time to them. You should talk to them. How to hire the staff? You have to hire for attitude, not for and train for skill. What is our normal mentality? We want to hire a skilled person. No, you hire a person with the attitude who want to achieve something in life, and then you can train them for skill. Like hiring, then recognition, giving them reward, communication with them, training them, and this make you are a brand. Henry Ford has said once a time, you can take my factories, burn up my buildings, but give me my people. I will build the business right back again. And same thing we saw in the Bahubali film. His emperor was lost. He again made the emperor. He was again made the king by his own people. So your staff is more important to you than your building and your machinery. Are you too busy to be successful? Our medical school do not train us in the business of healthcare. And without prior business knowledge, we start our practice as time goes. We start seeing more and more patients, become more and more busy, but not many of us are truly successful as far as finance is concerned. This is because of lack of business understanding. You see, you are moving this wheel. You are busy. You keep moving the wheel. You will never come out of this because you do not know the business. You know only how to work hard. So feeling like a hamster on the wheel, you're running fast as you can, but never reach of your goals. Your schedule is filled with lot of patients, but you do not seem to make a lot of money. You do not have time for family, friend, or anything much out of your clinic. You wake up every day exhausted. So we want, you should work hard, but you should achieve more goal. You should have more finance with you with the same working hours. And that is by the name of branding. What is called? Spending too much time working in the business rather than working on the business. After some point of our time, our practice grow and our time is consumed by our practice. So we start working in the business rather than on the business. So how can we start working on the business? If you are if you are the person who prepares your business for your growth and have definite plans for the next 5-10 years. So we should be innovative. We should plan for next 5-10 years. Only then you can work on the business. Staying business focus on wrong things. We are doing business, but we are focusing on wrong things. As doctor, we do not know how his business is run exactly. Now, most of us are very good surgeons. To run the practice as a business, we need a strong skill such as market analysis, strategy, formulation, marketing, funding, etc. If we do not have this skill, we start focusing on wrong things. Losing sight of your most important.
Hey, doctor, please pardon the interruption.
Okay, 1 minute.
Request you to summarize within 1 minute.
Yes,
sir.
So most of our time we consume seeing patient. We do not have time to focus on our goals. So basically all of want to do more, but we should focus on our goals more. What is differentiate strategy? Based on skill, price and technology. We all doctors skill, we are the same price, we all have the same technology. So what is the thing which we make a differentiation for other? This is unique customer experience. Means patient enter your clinic, parking, welcome at the reception, ease of registration, doctor staff attitude, cleanliness, comfortable waiting area, good counseling, quality of optical shop. These all things make unique customer experience. That is important than your skill. So this is one thing I will like to say. Where you coffee shop, example of coffee, nuts are sold in 10 rupees, package in 25, service in 50. But when you go and sit in a restaurant and like Starbucks, you get it in 150 and 200 rupees. So you have to give that feeling to the patient. What is the patient? Doctor think outcome is the quality. No, patient does not happy with the outcome only, vision only. They should be happy when they have from the initial phone contact, official visit, procedure day and post-procedure day all. When they get satisfaction in every step, then they are happy. They are not happy only on post-op day one by vision. If the doctor is not good, staff is not good, they will never be happy even by vision. So they have to be happy on all the steps in your hospital. So I am concluding. So apply more smarter people with you, even if you have to pay more. Counselor is the most important person to doctor in your hospital. Determine your most profitable service and develop this service more. Delegate duties to enter the people. Develop a plan. Have a good website, Google hacking. Do not read this book now. You are enough read in the medical college, killing of thought, basic of the. Do not read this book now. You read these books now. Myth, economy, best and business book. You should read these business books now. And when you read these books, you become an entrepreneur. That's Sarishika is going to speak. I've got brand made by a brand that I've got a time. I am running a college nursing. I'm running a Corona Pharma, a pharma company. I'm running a printing press. I am running an NGO because I got a time, despite all the commitments in AIS, in secretary of 2 or 3 National State Society, Chairman Scientific Committee. I have got the time because I have made my brand and I can give time for these all things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Satanshu, for that exhaustive talk about practice management and how to focus on your practice. So since you have just presented, it's my pleasure to now invite Dr. Sri Ganesh to speak on entrepreneurship in ophthalmology.
In the meanwhile, I'll give a brief introduction of Dr. Sri Ganesh. He is the director of Netradham Eye Hospital in Bangalore. He is one of the pioneer surgeons in refractive surgery in Karnataka and in India. He has made many publications and presentations throughout the world, and he has articles in many peer-reviewed journals throughout the world.
I'm not able to get my desktop. There's some on the share.
In case you are facing a problem, can we move on to the next speaker? You can come in next.
No, but the thing is, I mean, the presentation is ready, but I'm not able to go to my.
Yes, sir. And guide you.
We'll do that.
Okay. They will guide you. In the
Okay.
Is Dr. Virendra Agarwal here?
Yes, sir, I am here.
Yeah. Hi, Virendra. Like you can share screen and speak. I request Dr. Satyajit to invite you to speak.
Our next speaker will be Dr. Virendra Agarwal. He is a prolific surgeon from Jaipur, well known throughout the country. He has made many publications and in peer-reviewed journals, and he has presented in many conferences all over the world. He is a well-known refractive surgeon in Rajasthan, and he has several presentations throughout the country. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Virendra Agarwal.
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you, Satyajit. I would like to share my screen. My net is giving some problem, but I would like to share. And thank you, Dr. Manoj Mathur, Dr. Satanshu, Dr. Satyajit, and all others who are present in the panel and the presentation and the scientific committee of the Tamil Nadu of the Telangana Ophthalmic Society.
Virendra, you can go to
as you all know that we are now having,
Full screen
okay.
karna.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So as you all know that now we have many schemes which are run by central government or state government, and many corporations are also now coming with these schemes. And ophthalmology practice, as you all have seen, has evolved and changed a lot in last 3 decades. When I joined as a postgraduate, it was mainly an era of ECC, then FECO started, and then SIC started. SIC is a very good technique, but the FECO came first in India. I don't know about other countries, but probably FECO was there, and then SICS came. And the government has done what? We have different type of practices, as we all know. Mainly, it is a solo practice. Majority are doing that. Some are groups. Few are corporates in ophthalmology. Luckily, not many corporates are there. And government sector is one part. What government has done basically is that the government is not able to cater the health services in India, across India, whether it is a different state, different political commitments and parties. But what they are doing is, because they could not do the health services on their own, so what they have started taking the help of private. So initially it was a kind of thing in which they were thinking that we will take a help from private people, but now they want to control the private people. And for this, unfortunately, Clinical Assessment Act has come, which has given full power to the government for the control of private hospitals. Though it was there before also, but not in direct means. Now even the district magistrate, collector, or SDM, they can come and seize your hospitals for no reason. If they find that the health services provided by you may be harmful, or even if it is not harmful, but some of the areas which you are feeling are not up to mark, because they have come out with the many standardizations. Some of them are very good for making the things better, but is not always better. And you all know that the things which we don't want to deal, we want to ignore. But by doing so, we are going to be like ostrich, and it is not good for us. That's why I have chosen this topic to speak on, that the health schemes initially are looking very good, but are they really good or not? The practice pattern is changing. Majority of the patients are now coming through insurance, maybe a government sponsored schemes, maybe a group business, maybe by state related health schemes. And many of the individuals are also getting insured. And because of the insurance, many of the patients who are coming to us are getting a cashless treatment. There are some advantages of cashless, but there are many disadvantages also of the cashless. And with the change, now particularly the central government has come out with the new scheme for downtrodden or lower socioeconomic status. The middle class is going into their own Mediclaim, and the higher class are very few, for which they are coming and paying you by cash. CHS scheme is well known to all of us, and it is there in service for many years, but unfortunately rates are fixed for many years and maybe for future also. The state government schemes are coming, like in Rajasthan we have our own now Rajasthan government health scheme on the basis of CHS, for which they have come out with the concept that initially we will follow the CHS, later on we may have our own rates. It may be very good if we get good rates, but it is not looking like that in a positive manner. Ayushman or PMJ, as you all know, is a scheme launched by Prime Minister almost 1.5 years ago, and some of the patients are being treated. Still, it is not adopted by all, but majority are getting adopted. And some of the people who are accepting and making cards will come to you and they will sit on your head, which I will come later. PPN Mediclaim is a good thing, but with the new schemes, they are having some insurance agencies or insurance agents, and later on it may happen that TPN Mediclaim will also be having non-profitable kind of business. Many semi-government organizations are now following CHS rates, and they are demanding that when you can operate on CHS rates, why can't you give the same to the private patients? So as you all know, credits are increasing, cash is decreasing. For the bigger practices of the multi-specialty hospitals, many crores are lying for credit and is not being reimbursed to them, and they are facing too much of the trouble. And now for ophthalmology also, this is going to increase and will be a big trouble. The unfortunate part is the many states, just for votes or for any other reasons, to hide their own inefficiencies of not providing the healthcare through their government infrastructure, now coming and trying to get it through private establishments. But again, I said their mindset is not positive. Many of the standards are now being asked by everyone, whether it is a TPA, government schemes, non-government schemes like QCI, NABH, JCI, and they are not simple. I welcome the installation should be there in practice, but asking undue things will not be possible for majority of the people like who are doing solo practice or the people who are in individually owned hospitals in which there are too many expenses are increased. I always again say that standards should be there. Majority of the doctors are doing good practice by maintaining their standards. The main reason is that now we have a positive competition. You need to do better than any other or surrounding people or near peers. Then only you will have more patients. As Satanshu was saying, the brand has to be there. The brand is not by just doing work. Brand is there by your quality of the work also. Though there are many other ways by which you can temporarily increase your brand value, but ultimately brand value is by your quality of work. And continuous quality checks are ensured by you is good for your hospital. But when government agencies are involved in checking those quality measures, what they do is they say that it is not up to mark. And on these flimsy reasons, they can come out and seize your hospital for working. Training and upgradation of the staff is a must, and it is a good learning we have learned by doing the accreditations in different agencies that we were not doing continuous training of the staff, but this is a big help. It is easier to get employment if you are NABH or any other kind of accredited hospital is already there. There are certain pool of patients now developing a mindset that they want to go to either empaneled hospital or accredited hospital. So we have to take care in that also. But unfortunate part is that the hospitals are forced into it. As I said in the beginning also, that the positive competition is creating and increasing the quality of services provided by all practitioners. But if the hospitals are forced, many times the land area or the staff is becoming a problem, like particularly for we say nursing staff, it is difficult to get a nursing staff in ophthalmology setup because they would like to work more in a multi-specialty hospital. In ophthalmology, they don't find their good future. So that is a problem. Some of the standards are copy-pasted, which are not possible in India, and they are good for Western kind of community where the payments are good, but it is not happening and not possible for it. Though we all have majority of the people now having a modular OT or AHU in their OTs, but I unfortunately could not find any significant difference. And to many friends I talked, they never found the infectivity is changed by modular OT or AHU. It was not there in the routine OTs also by maintaining just simple practices of keeping the asepsis in mind also. Because in ophthalmology, the majority patients are coming are not infected primarily, so OT remains good, clean even after many surgeries. Reanimations are decreasing. The government does not give any benefit to industry like a land cost or the equipment cost or electricity on some subsidized rate, no relaxation in the taxation, and the salary of the staff and your colleagues is a big burden to maintain because many of the organizations are now asking too many number of doctors. Like in Rajasthan Government Health Services, they have asked minimum 3 consultants and 2 senior agents. So just to take treatment of to take empanelments for treating Rajasthan government employees, we need to keep 5 ophthalmologists, which I feel is not of any use. And the type of cataract is immaterial, whether it is a brown, subluxated, pediatric cataract, or some complicated, or you require the GA, and that also remains into the same cost. The same rates are given to the government hospitals and private services, and the line written in the PMJ key benefits are the government hospitals are treated at par with the private hospitals in providing remuneration. It means that the government hospitals which are being financed and supported by the government itself, they get a big huge land free of cost. There are so many consultants that other teams staff are being taken care by a government, and despite all, to run the services as we do in private, the government hospitals and private hospitals will be paid equal. So it will be a major imbalance. And as you all know that 90% of already healthcare provision is done by private hospitals in India. Only 10% is there now in government. And if the government feels that the government rates are good enough to do private hospitals, we should actually get free cost land. Our salaries should be paid by a government. We should be kind of managers to run the hospitals, but it is not so. Actually, what happens whenever some new scheme comes, we are being lured by the thing that our volume will increase, which is not going to increase because now every hospital will be on panel. So that should be there. And if I look as a medical student's future, actually the majority of surgeries of the lower socioeconomic status or otherwise were being done in the medical colleges, and so the residents were getting hands-on for surgery. But now this surgical load will shift to the private hospitals. Medical colleges may suffer to give any cases to our residents. The incoming future of the residents is very bleak in my opinion. Inflation is increasing, government servants DA is increasing, but our remuneration and reimbursement are fixed. Just for the simple thing that 2014 CHS was introduced new rates for FECO. Before that it was cataract surgery, and in cataract surgery by non-FECO the procedure charges was almost 7,500 plus IL cost. And with the FECO, you all know that there are many consumable costs for FECO, many other parameters to be maintained, and they have increased the cost by 2,000 to 3,000 only. And that too is fixed for last 10, 12 years. So that is a big problem, and they are not thinking even to change. And you will be surprised that there is a document in which they have written the contribution from the central government health employees is being increased in view of that the salaries to be paid to doctors and staff to maintain the central government health services is becoming a difficulty. So when they feel that the CHS contribution need to be increased, why they can't think and why they should not think to increase the packages for the hospitals when we are doing treatment. And particularly for CHS, I say that they don't have their own infrastructure for admissions in majority of the cities, leave aside except Delhi and Bombay. I don't think any other places they have their own hospitals. So if we all oppose it and we make them open, that they should understand that working on the fixed rates for long term.
Dear doctor, request you to summarize in 1 minute. Please pardon the interruption. Thank you.
And there are many things. Okay, I will take 1 minute. I will take 1 minute. Yeah, I will take 1 minute. So these are the kind of things. 2014 rates for cataract. As I said, 2007 the rates for extravascular cataract extraction was 7,500. In 2014 it became 3,400. For SIS it became 5,000. And for FECO with foldable it became 10,781. That in Delhi. In Jaipur and other cities like B class, it is almost 1,000 less than this. So it is very, very difficult and impossible kind of thing to work on this. And you will be surprised that initially it was a tertium surgery to be done in 70 rupees and now it is 5,500 rupees. But 70 rupees surgery can they think of, it is a very, very big thing. And I again emphasize that Clinical Assessment Act is having very few only good things, but rest of the things is just to take a command in government that private hospitals can be harassed, crushed, stressed, or any kind of negative can be done. So it should be taken care into our mindset that by this, the healthcare will also come into the effect of Inspector Raj. In CA in Rajasthan, they have included local police also into the governing part of your hospital, and local police, you know, just want to earn money. And by that, they can come and say anytime, doctor, this is not good, that is not good. So these kind of problems are going to be there. Ayushman PMJ, luckily in Rajasthan, it is not there for cataract. So we are very, very lucky. But there are few states who have kept Ayushman into their health schemes, into their state, and 7,500, including IOL cost. Majority of the people are initially feeling happy because suddenly the volume has upsurged to 2 to 3 times, but it will not be there in future. So I just want to warn all people that we should think over it before joining these new health schemes. And I will request our all societies to jointly fight back. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity.
Sir, thank you, Dr. Virendra. I would like to request all the speakers to stick to their 12 minutes time limit, please, because the session is pretty tight. Dr. Sri Ganesh, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank the TOS team and Dr. Santosh for inviting me to chair this session and also to give this talk on entrepreneurship. So let us look at what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. So who is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is a person who organizes and manages a business undertaking, assuming the risks for the sake of profit. Any person of any age who starts and operates a business is an entrepreneur. So you should know the difference between an entrepreneur and a small business owner. This is very important. So an entrepreneur is one who establishes and manages a business for the principal purpose of profit and growth. And it is characterized by innovative behavior. He is bringing something new to the business, and he will employ strategic management practices in the business. Whereas a small business owner establishes and manages a business for the principal purpose of furthering personal goals. Business primary source of income is the business, and it consumes majority of one's time and resources. Business can be perceived as an extension of personality, family needs, or desires. So if there is a small nursing home and then the son takes over the father's nursing home, then it's a small business owner. But if you are starting something new in the innovative in the market, and you're expanding this for the sake of profits and making profits, then you're an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur engages in a behavior that is aimed at profitability and growth, and business is characterized by innovative strategic practices. Whereas a small business is independently owned and operated, it is not dominant in its field and doesn't engage in any new marketing or innovative practices. There are three aspects of entrepreneurship. The first is the identification and recognition of market opportunity and the generation of a business idea. The business idea may either be a product or a service to address that opportunity. So basically, an entrepreneur sees an opportunity and is able to make use of that opportunity to generate profits from a business. The second aspect is the marshalling and commitment of resources in the face of risk to pursue the opportunity. So an entrepreneur will have to gamble, he will have to invest his money, and there is some amount of risk to pursue that opportunity which the market offers. The third aspect is the creation of an operating business organization to implement the opportunity motivated business idea. So the business organization could be infrastructure and human resources. It could be building a team so that the opportunity which presents can be utilized and it can be converted to a business idea. So these are the three aspects of entrepreneurship. In ophthalmology, I can give you an example. So when refractive surgery started, and if you do not have anybody offering refractive surgery among your colleagues or in your area, then this is a business opportunity. And then a person who is able to invest in a LASIK machine and then promote that and then make use of this opportunity, able to make the infrastructure, engage counselors, do some innovative marketing, and then turn this into profit would be an entrepreneur. There are different types of entrepreneurs. So you basically have three types of entrepreneurs. One is a serial entrepreneur. So a serial entrepreneur is a person who has his enterprise only for profits, and he can take up multiple projects. So he would put his hand wherever there is an opportunity and there is where he can generate a business to make profit. And there is a definite exit strategy in the sense that he can make money out of the business and exit the business so that he gets his profit. There are, of course, most of the businessmen who have multiple investments are serial entrepreneurs. If you look at Shark Tank, if you look at somebody like Mark Cuban, they look at different aspects, and whenever there's an opportunity, they invest. Even among ophthalmologists, you can have that serial entrepreneurship. You open ophthalmology centers, then you see that dental centers also there's an opportunity making money. Then you open dental clinics or dialysis units. So anything that makes profit. And then you can also take private equity or go public, and then you exit, and then you make your money. A social entrepreneur is basically an entrepreneur who starts an enterprise to help the community. And this is a self-sustainable model. There is no exit strategy. Most of the social entrepreneurs actually make foundations and that help the community. And in ophthalmology, of course, most of the halls here in this conference are named after social entrepreneurs, be it Dr. G.N. Rao, Dr. Badrinath, or Dr. G.V. These are typical social entrepreneurs who have developed an enterprise to help the community. Helping the community could be helping the underprivileged directly, or even offering training programs, courses, to bring out better manpower to help the community. So teaching, all this is social entrepreneurship. And then you have the lifestyle entrepreneur who is very passionate about his profession and puts his passion before profits. And he's able to create an innovative, self-sustaining, profitable enterprise. Most of us are lifestyle entrepreneurs. There's no definite exit strategy here, but it's basically you're pursuing your passions. And one can turn into the other. For example, a lifestyle entrepreneur can turn into a serial entrepreneur, take private equity, expand, get into different businesses. A lifestyle entrepreneur also can turn into a social entrepreneur after a period of time. And if you look at my journey, I started as a solo practice. We have 8 hospitals now, and they are private. It's a private limited company. So I started as a lifestyle entrepreneur, very passionate about growing my business and about my profession. But now, of course, we have a lot of charitable. We have an NGO, a charitable venture where we do almost about 10,000 free surgeries every year. And we also have teaching programs, we have fellowship programs, we have residencies. So all this is social entrepreneurship. There are 5 characteristics of successful entrepreneurs. One is drive, which is defined as the most important attribute of an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs can expect long hours, high stress, endless problems when they launch a new business. They should have an aptitude for human relations. This characteristic recognizes the importance of the ability to motivate employees, retain employees, sell to customers, negotiate with suppliers, convince leaders. Personality plays a very big part in the success in this area. If you look at a typical example is our ex-president of AIOS, Dr. Maipal Sachdev. He has a lot of drive and he has an aptitude for human relations also. Very good negotiator also. So these are some of the characteristics. The other characteristics are communication skills, or the ability to make yourself understood. This is very important. Thinking ability, or the characteristics that encompass creativity, critical thinking, analytical abilities, and originality. Technical ability speaks to the need of the entrepreneur to know their product and their market. This is also very important. As ophthalmologists, we know our business, our market. So that is also very important. They must consider the long and short-term implications of their decisions, their strengths and weaknesses, and also the competition. In short, they need strategic management skills. So the first step when you start out in a business or entrepreneurship is the risk factor and what happens if you fail in the venture. Then you have to do a personal assessment. Do I have it in me to succeed? Whether you have that drive. Then also support of family and friends. How and where to start. Where are you going to get the funding, the finance, and finally whether it will be a profitable venture and whether you will be able to make money out of it. Personality characteristics, of course, this I already touched upon. Huge drive, willing to take risks, able to develop new ideas, able to get on with people, strong leader, driven followers who will be there with you, a dominant kind of a personality, and people who have problems with the manager above. They want to be the kingpin or the manager, and they want to manage everything. And these are typical personality characteristics of an entrepreneur. Crystallizing your thoughts before starting the business is very important. First and foremost, you will have to have enough money coming out of the business to make a daily living, and you should be able to achieve social and economic security. You should be able to work for oneself, not for others. You will have to be able to commercialize a particular idea, a technology, or a skill. It could be anything. Idea could be a marketing idea. It could be bringing in new technology, or if it is skill, suppose you're offering a particular type of surgery, say topical phaco, that could be a skill. And you'll have to focus on the business and become the market leader in a short period of time.
Dear doctor, please pardon the interruption. Request you to summarize in 1 minute.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you'll have to identify business opportunities, scan competition, put down your key services, products, meet peers, businessmen, put together a business plan, find out funding avenues, get together a team, and then plan your finances. The entrepreneur's perspective has to be customer driven, customer focused, and then next is the stakeholders, and then your team. So I think this I will not, because of paucity of time, but then financial planning is very important. Return on investment is the name of the game, and you'll have to look into that. You'll have to assume goodwill, but have audits. And team is very important. You have to be in charge, get the right mix, find a good salesperson, and of course, for social entrepreneurship, you'll have to adopt a project, involve a team, reward star performance, and it has its advantages and its rewards. So basically, entrepreneurship has some advantages. You're your own boss, enjoy the profits of your efforts, sense of pride in your business, flexibility in work schedule. But some disadvantages, you need to put in long hours, need money to start, have to keep up with government rules and regulations, may have to make hard decisions, and you may lose money. So what I would like to tell you all before I stop is always put science before commerce as doctors, ethics before EBITDA, and your patience before PAT, that is profit after tax. So just stay in business. Whatever you do once you start it, it usually takes time. Do whatever it takes to make it to the third year, because usually you start seeing the profits after the third year. Don't flame out. So best of luck. And with that, I would end my talk. Thank you very much for a patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Sri Ganesh, for that wonderful talk. May I now invite Dr. Sonu Goel? Are you there?
Sir is not joined.
Sonu is joining a little late, Manoj. You can
go. Dr. Harbansh Lal. Dr. Harbansh Lal, please.
Yeah, I'm joining.
Yes, sir. Dr. Harbansh Lal will be speaking on tonic IOL, get it right, if not set it right.
So, first of all, let me thank President Dr. Jagan Mohan Rao, the Secretary Raja Lingam, and Dr. Manoj Mathur and Santosh Sonagar. Now, when we are talking of the toric IOL, there are 4 things we need to look at. What is the type of astigmatism, whether it's a type regular or irregular. If it is irregular, then refractive astigmatism may be more important than the corneal astigmatism. That we need to keep in mind. And what is the volume and what is the axis over here? Axis is more important. When we do the measurement, there are certain pitfalls which may be because of the equipment, and most important is dry eye. When we want to fine tune our IOL selection, then SIA, posterior corneal acceptance, anterior chamber depth comes into the consideration. Then we come to the surgical pulse. So there are many methods of measuring, and we need to understand that they measure primarily anterior surface, and what is the central area they are going to measure, we need to keep that in mind. And the pentacam also measures the posterior surface, or any equipment which can measure the posterior surface. So over here, averaging versus crowding. I mean, whenever my optom brings the IOL master or lenses are reading, I don't want to see the average keratometric value. I want all the 5 readings to find out if there's any outlier, if there's any axis is wrong, any power is wrong, and that also gives you the idea whether the readings are correct or not. So average reading may not be always correct. Even if you do not have a high-end machines, if the astigmatism is matching on 2 or more machines, and if you do not have a 2 machines, even the 2 observers are getting the same reading, even if you do not have a second observer, whether you examine the patient twice on the same equipment, you are getting the same reading, that means you are really more or less sure of the amount of astigmatism on the axis of astigmatism. So check and recheck is very important. Another, when you are comparing the pentacam reading with the LenSSR IOL master, should use the anterior surface corneal power for comparison, not the total corneal effective power, but use the total corneal effective power for your correction. That's very, very important. And also because the pentacam gives you reading at 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter, 4.5 millimeter. So according to your equipment, anterior surface corneal power up to between 2 and 3 millimeters should try to compare with the LenSSR and IOL master. Otherwise, you'll be totally confused because the pentacam reading at a 1 millimeter may be entirely different from 4 millimeter. So they make gross variation of 50 degree, 20 degree, and gross variation in the amount of astigmatism. So the pitfall in measurement, what I've seen most common is the dry eye. So if your readings are variable, whether it's an autokeratometer, whether it's a LenSSR, if the hashtag coming, that means most likely component which is responsible for it is dry eye. So most of the time it is rather a patient is coming next visit, then it's better to advise patient fluorometholone or lubricant eye drops for a week or so, and you will see that next time when the patient comes, their readings should be more or less matching with each other, and the axis variation will not be there, volume variation will not be there. So if you're planning for the toric IOL, you're planning for toric multifocal IOL, it is very, very important to have the dry eye management done for a week if you're getting a variable reading. When it comes to the posterior corneal astigmatism, if the age is above 40, it's very important when you are correcting the lower corneal astigmatism. That means when you are correcting less than 1 diopter, and when you are correcting higher corneal astigmatism, then you should take posterior corneal astigmatism into the consideration. Because when you are putting on a toric multifocal IOL, even 0.75 diopter of astigmatism may make a difference. So in this case, if you are not taking a posterior corneal astigmatism into the consideration, you may be absolutely wrong. Same way, more the astigmatism, more is the posterior corneal astigmatism. So whenever you are correcting more than 3, the patient has got a 6 diopter of astigmatism, his posterior corneal may have 1.5 or 2 diopter of astigmatism. And oblique axis, if you are correcting, then also probably you need to take into the consideration in posterior corneal astigmatism. Surgically induced astigmatism and anterior chamber depth are not so important, but they're important for fine tuning of selection, because whatever the lens corrects, like 1 diopter, 1.5 diopter, 2 diopter, so the lens is correcting into the steps of half diopter, and many a times the readings which we get is in between the two. Suppose you got a reading of 1.25 diopter, then you will take into the consideration whether your incision is at the steep axis or not, or whether it is going to correct or not. And same way, anterior chamber depth. Like if the anterior chamber is shallow, you will correct the lower cylindrical power. If it is higher, if chamber is deep, you need to have more cylindrical power to correct the same amount of astigmatism. But if you give a posterior limbal incision, most of the time SIA is really not significant. But if you are interested, you can of course calculate your SIAs. Then I'll miss that. Anterior cornea and posterior cornea, we know that when we are young, it is steeper vertical with the rule. Anterior cornea as well as posterior cornea. With the age, anterior cornea becomes against the rule, while the posterior cornea remains the same. So this is very, very significant. And the posterior cornea acts as a minus lens. That means the vertical steepness, or with the rule corneal astigmatism, if you measure only with the anterior surface measurement, will be less than what you are measuring, while the horizontal or against the rule astigmatism may be more than what you are measuring. So with the rule astigmatism, less than what you measured as against the rule most of the time, but not absolutely correct every time. So it is better to measure the posterior corneal astigmatism. Keep in mind the point I already elaborated in what condition you should measure the posterior corneal surface. So when we are talking of the IOL selection, these are the small SIA. Superior incision may influence more, Posterior corneal astigmatism we already highlighted, anterior chamber depth we already highlighted. Now we come, because we do all the calculation in upright position, so marking has to be done in upright position. Because when the patient lies down, there may be cyclotorsion, and some of the patients may have a significant cyclotorsion of 10 to 15 degree as well. So there are various methods of marking, and all of them work well. So don't have to worry. Even if you do this simple marking, make the patient sit down and do like a confrontation test, there's absolutely nothing wrong in it. But what you need to understand is that what you are doing is that you are marking the reference point, not 6 o'clock or 90 degree. After putting a mark, try to analyze your actual 6 o'clock is on the left side or the right side, the center of the mark. So consider it as a reference mark, not exact 90 or 180 degree. So the another most important significant point, what I feel is that when you put the implant, you should not use the methyl cellulose. Hydroimplantation is the best. I use the sodium hyaluronate, which can be completely removed from the back. Methyl cellulose cannot completely remove from the back, and the lens may rotate. So I usually prefer, I will not show you the video, but come to the next point, toric IOL refractive surprise. What next? So what is a toric IOL surprise? Presence of central refractive error of more than 0.5 diopter can be considered as a toric refractive surprise. So toric IOL surprise, we need to find out whether it can be corrected by the toric realignment or it cannot be corrected by toric realignment. For this, what we need to know is what is the post-op refractive error, what is the post-operatic astigmatism. Forget about what was pre-op, nothing to do with that. What correction by IOL maximum you can get at a corneal plane. So what is the keratometric astigmatism? B minus C, what IOL can correct? The difference between is that which could not be corrected by the refractive error. So if this non-corrective refractive error is high, then it cannot be corrected by the realignment. So if this is low, that means it is because of misalignment and you can correct it. A minus D, that means if you remove the correctable, non-correctable from what you could not achieve, you can get the what you can correct by the realignment. And for those who cannot be corrected by the realignment, then laser correction, piggyback IOL and IOL exchange are the other options. So misalignment calculation, it is not that we are correcting the error, we are correcting the misalignment. So total correctable astigmatism multiplied by 30, we can calculate, we know that at 30 degrees there is no correction. We can calculate the misalignment in degrees. Suppose there is a residual correctable astigmatism, that means the astigmatism which we can correct is 1 diopter, and total correctable was also 1 diopter. You use the lens 1.5, that means there's a 30 degree of misalignment. But if the residual astigmatism is 1 diopter and the correctable astigmatism was 6 diopter, 1 by 6 into 30, that means 5 degree of misalignment. That means you targeted for 6 diopter of correction, you underachieved by 1 diopter, that means misalignment is only 5 degree. But you targeted for 1 and still under correction is 1, that means misalignment is by 30 degree. So this is another same. So realignment is done when there is a significant misalignment. It can correct significant residual astigmatism. So I'll just show you one patient who had a lens star reading and pentacam reading over here, and we put on a multifocal toric IOL of 16 and 1.5 diopter. Post-operatively, patient had 1 diopter spherical with minus 1.5 diopter central at 30 degree. And had no correction whatsoever because that was the astigmatism to start with. Now the lens star reading was 1.56 diopter at 94. Now what I was talking about the pentacam reading at 3.3 millimeter was 1.6 at 95, while at 4 millimeter it was 1.1 at 81.4. So there is a huge difference between the axis and a volume on a pentacam between 3 and 4 millimeter. We plan to put this lens back into 90 degree, which we thought is the right place for the astigmatism. So we have got nothing to do with the pre-op because whatever your incision, everything has done has been corrected. So we go and now this is the patient which has got a trifocal lens toric IOL. So we mark the 90 degree as I was talking that this is my reference mark, which I thought should have been little more nasal than where I have placed. So I'm marking this onto 90 degree now. So the reference mark was slightly off, little more temporal. And once you mark this lens, so this is very easy to actually within 2-3 weeks, it's not very difficult to rotate. And these lenses can be very easily rotated up to 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So if you're finding misalignment, I think you should not waste your time. Rather, you should go and correct it. So normally I give the indentation with the chopper And when you give 3 indentation, you need to find out which indentation is most correct. Most of the time, the peripheral most is usually accurate because that is where your ring is lying. So once you have marked them, then you go inside, we open the side port incision, which was already there. And normally I make single side port incision. And in this case, you don't have to open the main incision because that will make the things a little unstable. So we made the another side port incision, use the sodium hyaluronate to lift it up and inject between the anterior and posterior capsule. So after injecting, this automatically goes a little behind. And once you have put in this sodium hyalurate, this lens can be easily rotated. As you can see, the rexes were a little larger than the usual. And actually, in fact, when I was trying to rotate this lens, it was looking like it was sticking at some capsule over there.
Dear doctor, please pardon the interruption. Request you to summarize in one day. Thank you.
So we reposition the lens and remove the sodium hyalurate from behind the lens and always put on air to press it down. So the residual effective error post-op was 0.25 diopter spherical. Pre-alignment also was the spherical equivalent was 0.25. And now the patient was fully satisfied. So this will not work if the spherical equivalent error is more. If there is non-correctile astigmatism, that means the patient needed 3 diopter correction and you put in 1.5, it is not going to work. If there's an irregular astigmatism, if there's a jonular dialysis, if there's a PCT, if there's a lot of fibrosis of the capsule, probably realignment is not going to work. We'll have to find out some other option like LASIK, PRK, and IOL exchange. And so you have to go for these type of options in these cases. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Harbansh Lal. Dr. Sri Ganesh and Dr. Satyajit Sinha, do you have any comments to make?
Sir, I wanted to ask one question. Suppose in case we are going for LASIK, all the other options are, we have reached a dead end and we want to do LASIK. After how much time of doing the cataract surgery would you suggest the patient to be going for LASIK?
Minimum 3 months. I'll preferably 6 months if patient can wait.
Dr. Harbansh, in cases of high myopia, axial length is more, this is when we see a higher incidence of rotation because the bag is very big. So do you suggest any techniques for this using a CTR or because these are the cases where you get some amount of rotation?
I think CTR, whenever I feel that the bag is very big, even many patients I put now CTR, whenever I see the anterior is a little floppy, janus are a little floppy, and you see the folds in the posterior capsule after doing surgery when you want to polish. So any place where you feel the strength is not good, I think you should put CTR more frequently. And making not making rexes very large is very, very important in these cases. And of course, these cases are a little tricky. But the best part is that after putting the IOL, if you do the hydroimplantation, put on an air on the top and press the lens down and wait for a few seconds, few minutes. If you wait for 1 minute, the lens gets stuck in that position much more easily. So do not over pressurize the eyeball. If you keep the eyeball inflated, the bag also gets inflated. So pressure should be from the top. Keep the eyeball a little on the softer side. Then lens will, I mean, if you see the softer eyeball, you try to rotate the lens, you'll not be able to rotate the lens. And never ever use the methylcellulose. That I learned that you should never use the methylcellulose. So I usually, when I'm doing the oblique axis or where I have got a little doubt of these types, I put the full chamber like some of us and T-sec, they inject air and then wait for 7-8 minutes. If you wait for some time after injecting the air, the lens will get stuck over there.
Thank you, Dr. Harbansh. I now invite Dr. Satyajit Sinha to present his talk, Endothelial Protection in Phacoemulsification of Patients with Uncontrolled Diabetes.
I'd like to thank Dr. Manoj Mathur, sir, and Dr. Santosh Hanawar for giving me this opportunity today. I'll be talking on endothelial protection in phacoemulsification of patients having uncontrolled diabetes. Now, in these COVID times, a lot of patients have been staying over at home, and you're going to see a lot of these kind of cataracts, hypermature cataracts. And some of the patients have been on steroid also. Some of these diabetic patients were on steroids, and some patients had uncontrolled diabetes. And after these steroid treatment during COVID times, the diabetes had gone more haywire. One is that issue. Another issue is wherever the social life index is higher, you see a higher incidence of diabetes. And in coming times, we all know that it is predicted by 2050, India will be the diabetic capital of the world. If not, it already is. So we are going to see a lot of patients with diabetes, with uncontrolled diabetes. And in those cases, we have to ensure that we are taking care of the endothelium. Now, early diabetic changes of the anterior segment include endothelial changes such as Descemet's membrane folds and pigment deposits in the endothelium. However, there have been only a limited number of studies that have focused on the importance of corneal diseases in diabetic patients. Dr. He had done a study of endothelial cell loss in diabetics and non-diabetics eyes after cataract surgery, and his purpose was to assess and compare the changes in endothelial cell density in diabetic and non-diabetic patients after routine phacoemulsification surgery. Now, in cataract surgery is associated with endothelial cell loss, and diabetic patients who undergo cataract are at a significantly higher risk of developing post-operative epithelial and endothelial complications. So once you're dealing with these kind of patients, it's very, very important, especially in uncontrolled diabetes, that you do a specular microscopy before taking up these patients for phacoemulsification cataract surgery. Although one of the major complications of diabetic eye is diabetic retinopathy, corneal diseases can not only develop in diabetic patients, but are also difficult to manage. It is known that neuronal abnormalities directly affect the visual function in patients with diabetic retinopathy, but they may also be the cause of corneal changes in diabetic keratopathy. The findings of the anterior segment in eyes with diabetic keratopathy are more significant to visualize than those of posterior segment. Although the cornea may appear disease-free, in diabetic patients, marked biochemical and ultrastructural abnormalities which alter its functions can be present. Our aim was to see the incidence of endothelial cell loss if it is higher in uncontrolled diabetics during phacoemulsification and how to reduce the cell loss. While many things are happening during phacoemulsification surgery, our preview of this study will be focusing on endothelial loss. Endothelial cell dysfunction may place the cornea at greater risk of developing endothelial decompensation with bullous keratopathy. Diagnosing diabetic keratopathy at an early stage will help initiate appropriate treatment for preventing further complications. Now, this is a scheme we have been seeing since post-graduation days. This is a scheme of AGEs accumulation and their effect on corneal tissues. AGEs accumulate in diabetic corneal cells and induce nuclear oxidative DNA damage. And finally, the corneal cells die of apoptosis. On the other hand, AGEs accumulation enhance collagen cross-linking. The black spots in the diagram indicate AGEs accumulation in the corneal tissue. Now, this is a scheme of endothelial cell dysfunction in diabetes. Hyperglycemia reduces the activity of sodium-potassium ATPase of the corneal endothelial cells. This leads to morphological changes of the cells which progress to corneal decompensation. Here we did a single center study which was undertaken from July 19 to December, wherein 43 patients with uncontrolled diabetes were included. Single surgeon used the same phaco machine for all the patients. In 22 patients with uncontrolled diabetes, high molecular weight viscoelastic having combination of chondroitin sulfate and sodium hyaluronate were used. And in 21 patients, regular viscoelastic HPMC was used. Patients with diabetic keratopathy have impairments of epithelial basement membrane, epithelial wound healing, epithelial stromal interactions, endothelial functions, and nerve functions. The corneal disorders associated with diabetic keratopathy are characterized histologically by subepithelial deposits, thickening of the subepithelial basement membrane, and altered morphological appearances of the corneal epithelium and endothelium. There is increased corneal thickness has been reported in diabetic patients. However, the reason for this is still not very clear. The central corneal thickness is increased. Several studies on the corneal endothelial cells in diabetic patients reported a decrease of cell density with polymegathism and pleomorphism. However, the percentage of hexagonal cells in diabetic patients was not significantly different from that in non-diabetic patients. In the 22 patients with uncontrolled diabetes, wherein high molecular weight viscoelastic having combination of chondroitin sulfate and sodium halonate was used, they had lesser loss of endothelial cells. And in 21 patients wherein regular viscoelastic HPMC was used, the endothelial cell loss was higher. Now, chondroitin sulfate and sodium halonate must be used in all patients with uncontrolled diabetes when they will be coming to your clinics and hospitals in these coming months, who will be undergoing phacoemulsification surgery. Even when the sugars are under control, still this high molecular viscoelastic has to be used in all these patients. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Satyajit. We have time for discussion. Dr. Ganesh or the other panelists.
Nice study. And of course, we know that dispersive viscoelastics really help in protecting the endothelium. There's another very interesting video, this APACRS, which won the best category in the cataract section, and that was using hydrogen infusion into the irrigating bottle, and that reduces the endothelial cell loss. So probably I was thinking that this also could be done, and this would help the diabetics because it reduces the oxygen-free radicals which are released during phacoemulsion.
Yes, Dr. Sonu Goel join.
No, not yet.
Satyajit, you can invite Dr. Basak.
Yeah.
It's my honor and pleasure to invite the next speaker now, Dr. Samar Basak, who is the director at Disha Eye Hospital. He is a high volume cataract surgeon and a cornea surgeon. He does many penetrating keratoplasties, and he's a well-known surgeon throughout, not only India, throughout the world. He has done some pioneering work in cornea, and he has many published articles in peer-reviewed journals. It's an absolute honor to welcome Dr. Samar Basak, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Satyajit, for nice introduction. And I thank President Jagan Mohan Rao, Dr. Rajalingam, Secretary TOS, Dr. Manoj Mathur, who is nicely conducting the session, and my friend Santosh Sonabar, who is running the show, and very good organization. My talk is actually the maximizing the utilization rate during COVID pandemic time, the cornea utilization rate. If you see that globally, there is a gross shortage of donor tissue, and as per 2016 report, that only one cornea is available for every 70 cornea needed. Until March 2020, there was a steady growth of donor tissue across all eye banks, including India. But then ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, there is acute shortage of donor cornea worldwide. US by 22%, Europe by 64%, Brazil more than 70%. But the demand remains almost same. And this was a statement given by our past Union Health Minister, Harshvardhan, that negligible cornea retrieval shortfall of donation. This was the last year's statements. And there are a lot of reports that's come in the literature on the COVID pandemic issue and donor cornea. So if you see our own India EBAI, Eye Bank Association of India report, 2019, 18, 19, 19, 20, we have at least 50,000 plus cornea collection, but in 2020, it is reduced by 11,000 something, minus 80% growth, though the utilization rate has increased because of lower number of cornea, but overall number of transplant reduced by almost 68%. This is the story of our eye bank. You see that till 19 we are doing fine, then this was a sudden drop in our eye bank activity, both collection and utilization. So there needs some strategies to increase donor pool and maximize the utilization. There are some strategies we are adapting. Many eye banks are actually adapting. One is the increasing the donor age criteria. Second one is use of pseudophakic and aphakic donor. Third one is split cornea concept, and there are other means to save the donor tissue. So donor cornea, elderly, 80 years and above. There is a concept that older donor means the poorer outcome without much scientific evidence. But you know that 88.6% of Indian population are more than 65 plus, and number of deaths in 80 plus age group is about 1.2 million annually, which is about 14% of total national death. This was, of course, the census, past census. This year, the census is not been done. And this was a report in Times of India that IBank may fix the age limit for donor cornea. And this was actually, if you see that this was actually from Maharashtra. There is a huge debate that they will not collect the donor above 80 years. So if you see that as I said, that 1/7 of all deaths in India is more than 80 years of age group. And this histogram, you see that in 91 and in 2011, there is a huge, the population has increased more than 70 plus age group. So this is, I am sharing our own data. So we have been submitted for publication. All aged donor in last 5 are between 2014 to 19, about 8,000 plus tissue. And among these, that 80 plus tissue is 25%. And the tissue, if we grade the tissue, 39% are good, very good to excellent, 45% are fair, and only 15% are poor, are not suitable for surgery. And 52% are from pseudophakic or aphakic donors. So if you see the utilization rate of those 5 years, if you see that above 80 group aged donor, utilization rate was 71%, and less than 80 years was 79%, the average being 77%. And if you see that in those 5 years, we have used actually 438 tissues for optical purpose, for optical PK, and optical means for optical PK, DSEK and DMEK. DALK is also for optical purpose, but we use actually lower graded tissue. The other tissue being used in like therapeutic PK is the maximum chunk, it's about 61%. Recently, we have submitted this for a journal, and we have analyzed the DMEK done with 80 plus tissue in 75 eyes. And after 6 months, 1 year and 2 years, the visual outcome are similar. And the endothelial cell loss is just same as the younger aged donor. Complications was also similar. So this is 2 examples. This is 90 years old donor I have used for DMEK IOL, and this is 100 years donor I used for only plain DMEK. There are some few interesting papers on it, and one can see that in eye, the tissue can go up to 140 years, theoretically. So second point is use of pseudophakic donor of any age. So you can use it for optical purpose. And also there are the indication for therapeutic PK and tectonic PK, K-procarrier, and also in DALK. Then the split cornea concepts. We know that there are several papers in it, right from Dr. Bajpayee to externally from outside the world. And theoretically, the model, if you show that 1 cornea can be used minimally for 2 patients and maximally for 5 patients, though this is highly theoretical, but one can save in US situation, it is about 1.5% to 20% tissue for future transplantation.
So stamp on the DM site during donor preparation.
So I am showing this video recently. This video is accepted in American Academy for this year. And you see that normally we actually perforate the stromal site for DMEK preparation and we cannot use those tissue. But with a BCL interface technique, we can use this tissue. So after making the DM loosened from the first refination cut, then you remove the DM graft, they peel the DM up to a small hinge. Then I have modified this, I keep it separated. I use a bandage contact lens and resize it up to 10.5 millimeter diameter for better 12 millimeter diameter, and then a central punch to make a hole in the center of that BCL, then stand it for better identification and put the BCL in the interface of DM and stroma. So then the DM is floated back. Then the BCL, the rest of the DM is peeled and whole DM is actually floated over the BCL. The main idea is to preserve the anterior whole stroma along with epithelium and bowman so that that tissue can be used for other purpose. And then just flip it. Now you put on a air background, you soak it and put the S-stamp. This S-stamp is very vital for our DMEK surgeon. And the whole BCL with DM is shifted to one that separate Teflon block. Now punch it at 8 millimeter and then shift it in the original one. Then you wash it and shift the graft to the Petri dish. So your DMEK donor graft is ready for preparation. And for the anterior stoma, now you can use DALK surgery. So the DALK can be done from the anterior part very nicely. We can do other surgeries with this anterior lamella like tectonic graft, large therapeutic graft, Boston K-Pro carrier. So during our iBanking data that the overall utilization is more than 105% after using this kind of splitting technique. And you know that voluntary donation has increased tremendously during the COVID-19 period. And you see that these 47 tissues are used actually for DMEK and other. The other means that say no to waste. So many surgeons and IBANKs prefer glycerol preserved cornea in acute crisis of donor. This was a study done by LV Prasad, and they have shown that this is the only thing which is most practical in Indian scenario. And the other types like non-viable gamma irradiated corneas for anterior lamellar keratoplastosis or keratoprosthesis, and then cryopreservation for long-term preservation. But those two are expensive and may not be practical in our country.
Dear Dr. Samar, I request you to summarize in 1 minute.
There is no age bar. If there is no medical contraindication, so you can collect either in Cornisol or Optisol GS medium or to MK medium. You have to select accordingly to minimize the cost. And there are certain indications like Cornisol, Optisol, young donor, phakic, apparently good acute death, favorable medical history. But when you are in doubt, you collect in MK medium like extreme of ages, pseudophakic, aphakic eyes. If the tissue collected more than 6 hours, then from mortuary, and there might be some relative contraindication. You do not waste expensive cortisol media, but to use MK media. And the flowchart is like that: we collect either MK media. If the tissue is good quality, after evaluation, we use it within 4 days. If it is poor quality, then transfer it at glycerin preserve, or we can use it for teaching or training purpose. If it is a cortisol media, good quality, you can use up to 14 days. If not used for some reason, because of lockdown sometimes imposed, then you may put it in glycerin preserved cornea, or you can be it can be used for teaching. If it is poor quality, from very day, after 2-3 days, you shift to glycerin preserved cornea. So glycerin preserved cornea is for future therapeutic PK or tectonic PK, and also for teaching purpose. So in summary, in India, even before pandemic, there was shortage of donor cornea with increasing demand for corneal transplants. It is likely that we'll have to live with COVID-19 for at least another 2-3 years or more. We do not know. Naturally, the burden will increase in coming years, and so also the backlog. This is the time to rethink about different approaches towards tissue saving and maximum utilization of donor. Thank you very much for your patient sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Basak. I invite Dr. Sri Ganesh and Dr. Sinha or any of the other speakers to have deliberation on this topic for about 2 minutes.
What is the status of artificial cornea? Whether is there something in the near future which would reduce
artificial
our
cornea? It is there already, but the cost is expensive, and it is not a good thing. And there are certain variation in Boston, but they are not marketing in India. Even the Oro K-Pro is also doing good, but those are for specific group of patient, very selective patient. Those still we are using it.
I also was reading recently that China, they're using xenografts.
Xenograft, yes, from porcine they are using it. But
so
again, they gave a stall in our cornea society. The cost of one tissue is close to $3,000 US.
Oh, that's again expensive.
So it is not our goal at all.
Any more questions?
Each Dr. So I think Dr. Sri Ganesh, you can invite Dr. Vanati to speak.
Yeah, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Vanati, who is a professor at RP Center, to give her talk on current perspectives in fungal keratitis.
See my screen?
Yes.
Am I audible as well? Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sri Ganesh, and thanks to the organizers of Cross Vision for making me part of this wonderful national symposium. I have no financial interest in the mention of any of the material during the course of my talk. I'm going to briefly take you over the next 10 minutes on what are the current perspectives in fungal keratitis. In our center, when we looked at data over the last 18-19 years, we did find that Aspergillus still seems to be reigning supreme, within closely following Fusarium species, which cause majority of the fungal infections. And of course, we do have a variety of other fungi such as Alternaria, Curbularia, etc., which are also causing infections in the North Indian population in our tertiary care center. What is important still is a very high index of suspicion of the fungal infection, so that you're able to pick up the infection early on. And this remains a very important aspect to successfully managing a case of fungal keratitis. This also helps in rapid diagnosis and helps to confirm your suspicion of the infection and results in early resolution of the infection here. I think still natamycin remains the gold standard in the management of antifungal medical therapy here. We did have a lot of concern over the wonder drug voriconazole, but where do we stand now as of on the opinion of use of voriconazole? I think the two large trials, the mycotic ulcer treatment trials, MUT1 and MUT2, have now made it very clear that topical natamycin is still performing as well, or in fact better than voriconazole, and we would still use it as the first line of medication. And the use of systemic voriconazole again has been underscored by the results of the MUT2 trials. So that is what is the current perspective on the role of voriconazole over natamycin in the management of fungal keratitis here. What is again important and or is of concern in diagnostic scraping is that culture positive scraping in cases of mycotic keratitis still remains low even in academic centers. Our center, we have about 22% positivity on culture positivity on scraping. So that is a particular concern when we are not able to grow fungi from the pathogenic organisms scraped from the corneal ulcer specimens, largely perhaps because the organism taken out is not viable enough to grow on the culture media here. So that's a huge concern because we are not able to get in a proper proper diagnosis for identifying the organism. These all still remain challenges in the management of fungal keratitis. And it is important to understand over 50% of cases of fungal keratitis will still need intervention by therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty here. So whenever we are confronted with the cases of deep mycotic keratitis here, an early confocal microscopy really helps to confirm our suspicions, pick up the hyphae here, but then it is not widely available in all centers and in places where fungal keratitis is more prevalent here. What we have come to understand is to look at the importance of the role of repeat cultures in the diagnosis of fungal culture and fungal keratitis. I will speak more about it in the next few slides here. Corneal biopsy in cases of refractory recalcitrant keratitis still has a role in cases which are challenging, and then you want to confirm your diagnosis here. What's evolving and what's promising is the role of metagenomic deep sequencing in diagnosis along with repeat cultures, which has now come into the forefront and is perhaps going to be going to play a lot more important role in the future of diagnosis in fungal keratitis. I'll also touch upon what is the role of corneal collagen cross-linking in fungal keratitis patients here. The importance in the difficulty in managing is many times when patients present to tertiary centers, they have undergone a treatment cocktail over a whole lot of antimicrobial medications, which alters the clinical presentation, which also prevents the isolating the fungus on growth. So this is an important concern. And what is important again to understand is the role of resistance to antifungal therapy. So you are now seeing more and more varying response of the fungi to the current antifungal therapy which we are using. So these are important concerns here. And therapeutic keratoplasty is required to avoid further progression, to avoid involvement of the sclera, and to prevent endophthalmitis, to restore the tectonic integrity of the globe. But one has to remember that the chance of recurrences in fungal keratitis following therapeutic keratoplasty could be as high as 50% here. Molecular diagnostics is playing a very important role here. PCR techniques here are really evolving and really helping you to pick up when the other conventional laboratory techniques have a lower sensitivity. It is more rapid and helps you to come to a diagnosis much earlier here. And post-amplification sequel analysis is playing a huge role here. And these molecular characterization techniques have helped in identifying newer pathogenic organisms such as the pythium here. I think I wouldn't delve into the depths of technicalities of metagenomic deep sequencing here, but this seems to be scoring over the PCR. And currently it is not yet FDA approved and is not in the routine protocols of fungal keratitis management. Perhaps in the near future, we will see corneal scraping samples being transported in nucleic acid stabilizing media to look at metagenomic deep sequencing. So there's some future which is lying in which we can look forward to in the future here. The MALDI-TOF mass spectroscopy again has helped in identifying several rare species of pathogenic fungi here. Before I close, I'll just touch upon the repeat cultures and its importance here. So what the MUT1 and MUT2 really taught us is looking at repeat cultures as an important diagnostic and a prognostic tool, rather than using visual acuity as an outcome measure. Looking at repeat cultures on day 6 after initiation of therapy, and it was found that those repeat cultures which were found to be positive were associated with a higher negative outcomes. The need for surgery was higher. These patients ended up with worse post-healing visual acuity and had a larger scar size. The need for therapeutic keratoplasty in these ulcers were also found to be more because we were largely severe corneal ulcers here. So when you are confronted with a repeat positive culture at 6-day therapy here, it would be wise to increase the drug dosage or to add on a different antifungal topical agent here. Add on an oral antifungal agent, closer monitoring of these patients, and perhaps take up these patients early for therapeutic keratoplasty, which would really help in saving these eyes and prevent further progression and worsening. So these are the lessons which we learned from the MUT trials, and they seem to be really useful in current management protocols here. What do we know about collagen cross-linking for antifungals for fungal keratitis here? There have been a few isolated case reports. It has been used in the refractory cases, but as of now, we do not have conclusive evidence that it's going to be really beneficial in fungal ulcers vis-a-vis its use in bacterial keratitis here. There is a large-scale trial which is now ongoing, and we are eagerly awaiting its results. That's the cross-linking assisted infection reduction, the CLARE trial done by Dr. Rose Nussbaum and her team, and we are looking forward to look at the clinical measures on this comparative study here. So we'll know more about it shortly. Again, antifungal susceptibility testing is now coming into the forefront. It was not done as a routine in most centers here, but we are seeing a lot of emerging resistance, partial resistance, decreased sensitivity to the routine antifungal therapies which are being used here. So looking at MIC values, perhaps with more easy modalities such as the E-strip testing here is probably going to make its way into the routine protocols of management, especially in advanced cases, one-eye patients, and in refractory cases here. So this is how we stand in the current perspectives of fungal keratitis. I think I will close here, and thank you all for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vanati, for that insightful talk on fungal keratitis. The talk is open for deliberation. Dr. Sri Ganesh, Dr. Satyajit Sinha, so Dr. Samar Basak, we have time.
Ma'am, I just wanted to ask, that was a beautiful presentation. Has penetrating keratoplasty started at AIIMS in Delhi?
Yes, we are doing penetratics. A large amount of them are therapeutics because that's the kind of tissue we are having right now. But our residents are now doing almost all forms of penetrating keratoplasty, T6, endothelial. Yes. The only thing is the tissue has really come down, so we are focusing more on training our residents here because we do have a high volume of residents here who need to go through, and it's been over 1.5 years now. So it's really a sad scene for all those who are in training in the surgical specialty.
So the main reason is the acute shortage of donors.
Absolutely, sir. Yeah, our load has increased.
Patients are now coming
in fact,
bulk, actually.
Yes, our load has increased or doubled. In first, they've been waiting for the last year, and our yield has been really very low. We are, as sir is saying, have a good amount of voluntary donation, but at our center, the National Eye Bank also looks at the RT-PCR testing from the donors here. So we do get a higher positivity rate as well. So that's affected our yield as well. So we are still being very cautious when we are using these tissues with the concerns with the Delta variant. I think it's not to be taken lightly over the next few months at least, though our caseload in Delhi NCR is pretty good. is in a quite good scene right now.
So before we end, I would like to have final comments from the chairpersons, Dr. Sri Ganesh.
I think we had an excellent session. So I would like to thank my co-chair, moderator, all the speakers, and the audience for this wonderful session. And Dr. Satyajit, over to Dr. Satyajit for his comments.
Satyajit, I think he has left. I would like
Yes.
to invite Dr. Harbansh Lal also. He is our Vice President AIOS. Your comments, sir?
I think the Telangana Orthopedic Society has really organized a wonderful program. I was going through the program, and every hall is running very much on time. So thank you very much for organizing a very good webinar, and excellent your annual conference. So very well done, Manoj and Santosh. I think two in tandem, you really bring out a lot of good things. An excellent session and very timely session. Great job done.
And Dr. Virender, are you there? If you want to say something, because I have to cut you short about the CGHS.
Yeah, it was a
If you want to say a few words now, you can. The gist of your talk, orally, what you want to communicate, because we are trying to reach Sonu Goyal. He's not receiving the call. So you can take some time and then we can wind up the session.
Dr. Virendra Agarwal, you had a lot of...
here.
Dr. Virendra Agarwal.
Yes, sir.
You had a lot of issues in which you said the Rajasthan government has put in a lot of rules which are not so doctor friendly. Can AIOS come and play a role in that, in helping the doctors over there in trying to change or formulate and change the guidelines? Does the AIOS have a role in that?
Yeah, I think IIS have a role. Initially, we'll start at our own society level from the Jaipur and from Rajasthan Orthopedic Society. And once we feel that we are not able to tackle, then definitely IIS will be taken into help, because they have more power and more centralized capacity also to influence the things. But there are some local issues. Because of that, everything will not be taken into consideration. So I think initially we should start fight at our own. And if it is not possible, then we'll definitely take help from the AIS. And
I think so.
Yeah.
What I would like to comment, actually, nowadays, because as a doctors are minority, so far as a vote bank is concerned, and so at AIOS level, what I personally feel we need is a public opinion. That means we need to educate the public. This is not in a public interest. I mean, if you are compromising on the quality, on the pricing, like suppose there was a time when they were allowing this Ayurvedic doctor to operate a cataract surgery. So who is going to suffer? It is not the rich man who is going to suffer. It is the poor rickshaw pullers or the poor patients who are going to suffer, going to get operated, go blind, and then keep on running here and there. So we need to talk to the media and make the public aware that these policies are not in the interest of the public. It is not going to affect us, because in any case, patient selects the doctor according to its paying capacity. So we always get a good quality of patients, so it is not going to affect us. But if you reduce the charges, if you do these type of things, it is going to affect the poor of the country more. So there should be more pressure from the media and the public. Then only probably we can motivate them. Otherwise, so far as we are concerned as a vote bank from them, we are a very small number actually. And because we also know that our system is a total corrupt system. And we do not have a capacity to bribe at any of the society level, because we don't have any black money. So how you will fill up their pockets? I mean, you can get things done if you can say pay a few crore rupees, probably the things will move over there. So, but then we can't do as a society. So I think the main is that to have the public opinion against them. And for that, I think paying to the media will be easier, and getting coverage done will be easier than paying to the politician.
Social media will have to be used.
You are very right, sir. The only thing is that, as you said, that for cataract surgery, now Rajasthan government has come out with the orders that optometrists can do pterygium surgery.
Yeah.
Looking to that you are making them at par with the surgeon. Initially, it will start with pterygium. Then gradually they can think of doing other cataract surgery or many other surgery also. But if you think into the thing that why terrorism is required to be done by optometrists, it is not a burden. If something is having a real burden which we can't tackle, cater, or the things are not available, then the paramedical staff can be taken into help. Like suppose for giving vaccination or other things where you need bulk, but terrorism is not that much number of surgeries are required. I don't know how many practitioners are doing a terrorism even per day. We are not doing, when we are doing 10 cataracts, we are not doing even one terrorism. Why the government has come out with this kind of order? So you are right that we need to take opinion on the media that why it is being required.
So because the problem is that, Dr. Brinder, because many few doctors will have the time to pursue with the politicians, because they will call you, they will make you sit, give a cup of coffee and then go away. So the things will not move there. So what if the public opinion is against this, and if they feel that their public is going against them and public opinion is building against them because of this issue, then probably they will listen to you more. So if you take an appointment, suppose from a politician today, and he may cancel the appointment. So you have cancelled all your surgeries and everything. Now you want to go there and he's not available. If you go there, doctor will look into you, make 4 visits, and you'll fed up and you'll stop going. So one is that we need to have the people working for us. We can't go ourselves. That means at a IOS level or the society level, there should be a manager who is competent enough to go and talk to them, who should handle it. We personally can't. And we need to have a strong media presence. That means we need to mobilize, whether it's a social media, electronic media, print media. So there should be team working throughout, like many of, we are talking of entrepreneurs, many of them are marketing their practices and they are paying the Google and they are paying the YouTube and doing all those marketing. So maybe our cause is being marketed by the media, which says that this is what is right and this is what is not right. So if even in the social media there is a hue and cry about it, that this is wrong to give this surgery because it is the poor patient who are going to suffer. The rich are not going to go there. This is an anti-poor measure. So this is what the politicians are going to listen. This is what I personally feel, because after being in so many offices and visiting so many places, I found out that we as a doctor, we are enthusiastic. What you see, so many people keep on giving the wrong advertisement, but we are not able to do anything. We are not able to do anything. Because it's open, they are writing that retinitis pigmentosa treatment, but still we are not able to do anything. So to counter them, we will have to have the people working for it full time. As a doctor, we will not be able to work because we are more interested in our practice. And all those who are there are very successful practitioners and with very little time available to them. So you need to have the people employed, good, smart people who work, and you need to go through the media. But this is what I feel the people are going to listen to. But of course, you can have your own opinion, and we can have include anybody's opinion into it, how to go about it. This is what my thought process, and we can have a broader way to strike them, how to go about it, and all of you can give your feedback. But definitely, we need to look into how to utilize the media. And of course, media should not be by name. That nobody feels it is Harman Sal is getting mileage or Maipal is getting mileage or Lalit Verma is. It should be by the IOS, so that there is no individual names. It should be the office of the president or secretary, but no name should be there. When we are talking, it should be from the IOS office.
You're right, sir. I think we should organize one kind of a conference in which we call the people who actually writes blogs or who are editors in the newspapers. So there we should comment upon that what we are facing. Like as I said, 2014 rates for CHS are fixed forever. And now they are thinking to reduce them for the reason because we are still working on them. So my request
media will come. Media will also come only when they are bribed. So that is another.
So it is not matter of bribe. So it is not. It is just as you said. We should put our points that we feel these are not right points, and government should think over it.
I'm telling you because I have done lot of media coverage when I started doing the topical paper in 1997. So at that time I was after the media, so I know how to mobilize the media and what they want. And so we will have to look into it, how to go about them. Because if you invite, say, Times of India for this, for them this is not an issue why they should come. Terrorism doing either by this or by that, this is not an issue. But if they get something out of it, then they are going to cover it up. Either it has to be made in such a way that you have to find out a patient who went blind because of their surgery, and you try to make an issue out of it. Then it will be covered by the media. So you will have to either have a story.
So, I understand, but by one issue they will not publish. What I'm saying is,
No, whatever issue it is, because
we should call some of the people who write in the newspapers what is the present status. So then we'll mention that the government is increasing the quality of medical services, but unfortunately they are not able to do it the same in their own government infrastructure. And now they are cutting the prices also, thinking that we are tolerant. So we are tolerant, we are not fighting, but it will not be possible to remain honest. That should come in the media. That by just continuing this kind of cutting the cost will not be remaining, the health industry will be into a positive manner. Then gradually malpractice will creep in. My talk, I wanted to complete what I said. Right now, only 2% people are doing something wrong. But gradually it will happen what? More and more people will be forced to do malpractice.
No,
I was personally talking to few of the IAS.
No, Virendra, we cannot say this in media, neither we can say in
I can't say. That's why I didn't
so this is
say
what
in
I'm
the talk
doing.
also.
So we will have to find out ways and means to put your point across. You can't say the malpractice will increase. I mean, that will be totally anti-doctor.
That we can't say. That we can't say.
So we will have to say something. This is the this is the.
Sir, I'll put in the other words. I'll put in other words that like in Jaipur, the CHS practice is less than 1% of our practice. The reason is because we don't have many of the central government employees. But in Delhi, it is a big chunk. But otherwise, if you take the central government price becomes the upper price circuit, the hospitals will not be financially viable by continuing the CHS services or CHS patients. And when this practice becomes core practice, you will not be able to survive. Government, on the other hand, are asking more and more of equipments, manpower, and their salary has to be maintained. For the lower salaries, you need to give bonus of 7,500 per year. That is a rule of PF. Then there is a ESI rule. You need to give them enough leaves and less of working hours. So these kind of things, it is impossible. Then they are asking for more of a qualified doctors also. They are asking for round-the-clock things. They are asking for backup FICO machine. They are asking for all equipment has to be there before empanelments. So this is indirectly increasing the cost, decreasing the prices. The both cannot go hand in hand. So what I meant to say that AIS should have a kind of some data, and for this we should write from AIS to the central government to have their auditing of the all medical colleges. What is the cost coming to them? If they are giving the 8-par rate in Ayushman to government and non-government organizations, we should demand that we should be given.
The strategy has to be multi-pronged. That we will have.
Free land should be given to us.
Thank you, Dr. Harbanshal and Dr. Virendra.
Thank you. Thank you. Good moderator should intervene.
Session now. I invite Sneha to wind up the session, please.
So thank you all the speakers. Yes, sir.
I'm very thankful to the Telangana Ophthalmic Society for giving this opportunity and keeping the things in a very organized manner and having a very many sessions and finishing them all in time. Big thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And also my thanks are due to all the speakers for wonderfully and articulately presenting the presentations on various topics. And also to the chairperson, Dr. Sri Ganesh, the co-chairperson, Dr. Satyajit Sinha, and the star moderator, Dr. Manoj Mathur. Thank you all once again. And I think we will be having our next session in 5 minutes. So we have 5 minutes to the next session. The next session is on extending excellence, innovations in ophthalmology. And for the next session, our chairperson will be.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
We can leave now.
Yes,
Sneha,
sir.
wait for a few minutes before convening the session again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Have a great day. Have a great day, all of you. Wonderful Sunday to all of you.